On Tuesdays, we talk social issues, lifestyle health, all those everyday issues that affect us in the big ways. Late Wednesdays are for book reviews. Thursdays are for the hard talk, those socio-economic, policy-oriented, political questions that demand for the tough questions to be asked. And Personality Profiling Fridays, when we get to know the stories behind the winning personalities we love. Inspirational story from inspirational personalities. Hey, listen, you really cannot miss The Couch with me, Amma, but still the only TV show with a hat.
To it, he's been dispossessed by Venati though, and hard by the hat from Neymar. Brilliant, quite incredible from the Brazilian.
Cheesy Pizza will always be by your side, celebrating with you in moments of joy and happiness. Enjoy your everyday life with a slice of Cheesy Pizza. Cheesy Pizza, your way.
Trasacco Estates, home to Accra's most beautiful and luxurious homes, presents its newest addition, Trasacco Springs, a premium master planned community of service plots surrounded by an exhaustive list of amenities. The gated community off Tema to Accra Motorway presents you the finest opportunity to own a land that suits your preferred size, budget, and payment terms. Trasacco Springs is open to you for development. Our on-site sales executives are ready. Call on 055 659 2658.
Information.
Madam,
Me, I have still not got the money for that list of expensive building materials you sent to me. The price of the iron rods have been increased too much, had I?
Madam, relax. Look, that's not why I even called. I just visited IPCP, where the engineers told me everything about Trasacco fast floor.
Trawanko, please, those people are expensive. Are they not the people building those big houses in town? I beg those guys.
Madam, in fact, I used to think the same until I visited their office today, and they gave me an estimate of how much it will cost. No more, the estimate is free. It's cheaper than the one I even sent you.
Wow.
Building contractors, foremen, masons. Visit IPCP, the Trasacco Fast Floor. Engineers will assist you build an affordable, faster, and stronger building.
Oh, madam. It is done.
Wow.
Trasacco Fast Floor. Stronger, faster, and affordable.
This is a Trasacco construction product.
Right, welcome back. You're still watching Diplomatic Affairs with me, Harriet Nate. We are live. We are streaming in 46 African countries, and we are in some parts of Europe via satellite with a global audience via social media. So you can tune in to YouTube and Facebook, and you will see us. We need you to be part of today's conversation. It's going to be very informative and very insightful. My guest, I have been chasing. I put it on WhatsApp. Those who are following me on WhatsApp, you saw it. I've been chasing him for some time for us to have this all-important conversation with regards to the United Nations. Finally, he made time, and he's here with me. My guest is the resident coordinator of the UN, and he is His Excellency Charles Abani. I am so pleased to have you on Diplomatic Affairs today.
Thank you for having me on your show today.
Do you know that feeling?
I finally mustered the courage to come onto this really beautiful program. I've watched it, and so it's a privilege to be here with you today.
We are grateful for your time, Your Excellency.
Thank you.
There is so much that I want us to touch on. I want to be educated, and I believe my viewers are also waiting for us to share whatever is happening with regards to the United Nations with them. Now, the UN is an intergovernmental organization. Mainly, it promotes peace and security. Before we go into your office, we would like to get to know you better so we can understand where you are coming from and talk about your office.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Harriet. So, you know my name. My name is Charles Rabbani, and I'm the UN resident coordinator here in Ghana. I come from quite a checkered background, principally in the development world. I've been in the development world since 1995, working with a range of different international organizations, VSO, ActionAid, Oxfam International, and then I moved, again, staying in the development space, into the philanthropic space, working with private philanthropies, and then moved on from there into private sector delivery. The last company I worked with was Chemonics before joining the UN. And so I think all of my life has largely been working and committed to issues of development, but from slightly different spaces. And the UN was the missing gap. Missing in a number of different ways. I mean, in terms of the perspectives that we all bring to this process, I think the UN is the premier, if you like, global compact of nations to address peace, security, development, as well as a raft of humanitarian issues that face the world. It's extremely powerful. It's member state run by governments, 193 governments across the world, and offers the platform around which important national issues, but also global issues, difficult issues, sometimes we call them wicked problems, the things that...
Wicked problems.
Wicked problems that require a different level of dialogue to find solutions to. And this is the platform. So an amazing space to be in, and I feel privileged to be part of the United Nations and privileged to actually be here in Ghana serving as the resident coordinator.
Interesting. Your background is very broad. You've always been in the development area, like you stated. I like, you touched on sometimes tackling wicked problems. That's very fascinating, and I'll talk about that with regards to the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Before we come to that, what does the UN do when it comes to its relations with Ghana?
So the United Nations, as we said, is a global multilateral organization made up of member states. And Ghana has been a proud member since independence and contributed in many ways. And I'd be glad to talk about that. But the essence really is, how do we, coming out of the Second World War, how do we build a compact for peace, for global peace and security? How do we address development across large tracts of the world, bringing nations to the same place around a set of core ideals and values which are represented first by the Millennium Development Goals and now by the Sustainable Development Goals. But also, how do we globally tackle difficult issues, conflicts, the humanitarian fallout from conflicts, such as those coming from the Ukraine-Russia conflict at the moment. But also, when I talked about wicked problems, how do we address some of them? And climate change is one of those, because everybody is impacted by climate change. And if you look at historical emissions that have resulted in global temperature rises, they're not necessarily equally distributed. But the impacts largely fall, for example, on developing countries, and particularly on the continent of Africa. And yet the resources don't necessarily sit in Africa. And so this year at COP27, for example, there'll be a lot of conversations about how we reduce emissions and which countries need to play a stronger role in reducing emissions. Ghana has very low emissions. And so putting an equal target for emissions, say, from the United States and from Ghana would be unfair. But Ghana is impacted much more by the impacts of climate change. And so how do the resources flow across to ensure that there is balance? These kinds of problems require generative conversation, they require multilateral cooperation, they require a sense of traveling and journeying in a particular direction, in the case of climate change, to no more than 1.5 degree rise in temperature. and then getting everybody to play their part in that. And so these kinds of problems...
Is everybody playing their part, though?
Well, you know, we've had a series of COP meetings over many years to discuss this. Last year in Glasgow, there were a lot of commitments, 100 billion a year towards climate change adaptation every year between now and 2030. And, you know, a target of net zero emissions that everybody's aiming for from 2030 through to 2050 if we're to keep global temperatures down. How we make sure that that happens will be the subject matter of COP27 this year for the first time on the African continent in Egypt. And really looking to how countries and citizens and civil society groups and the private sector can come together, hold each other accountable, A, to find the money, and B, to meet the promises that will help us to remain on course to keep temperature rises at a cap of 1.5 degrees. So it's a journey.
Yeah, the conversations have been hanging for some time now,
yes.
so we hope that we are able to make...
And in fact, COP27 is now dubbed the implementation COP, which means we've talked about it, we've agreed it, now we must do it. And that's the aim. And that's how the UN would hope, in the Ghana case, to support the Ghana government to be able to put its position together alongside the African Union position and take this to this global COP and secure the best deal it can for Ghana, for the African continent.
Let's talk about COVID-19. A pandemic hit all of us and it brought the world to a standstill. COVID-19 is still here, though. We've made some progress. We've contained the disease somehow. It looks like we have our lives back and we are going about our activities as usual. What was the role of the United Nations at the beginning or at the peak of, you know, COVID-19?
Before I talk about that, I want to make a nice connection between climate change and you know, if you like, the increase in pathogens around the world. We know that if we see a rise in temperature, we're likely to see different kinds of things happening in the ecosystem. And so it is important that we maintain this ecosystem. We've talked for many years about a possible pandemic. And so it was not really a surprise that COVID-19 came along. And nor should we, as a globe, think that we are now free from pandemics. Indeed, what we've shown is an ability to be resilient and fast in responding to pandemics. And I think COVID is probably the fastest. Science and technology has helped us to achieve a lot in a very short time. But we must always remain vigilant. And part
now we have chickenpox.
What we must be consistently working on now is building the resilience of healthcare systems, building the resilience of supply chain systems, so that if the world has to stop again, we're in a better place, and particularly those vulnerable people at the bottom of the pyramid who are affected, that we're better able to support them and their lives don't come to a halt. During the COVID pandemic, we did a number of things here in Ghana. So, of course, there was a whole global response, but the immediacy of it was finding ways to support Ghana to build the capability or to strengthen its capability to be able to handle the pandemic. We had something called the PCRC, which helped us to log into government's plan. And Ghana was one of those countries that developed a plan quickly. Certainly to contain the virus and begin to think about building back better. And so first with that and then our socio-economic response plan, we were able to repurpose a lot of money that was here for routine work to focus on the impacts of the pandemic, ranging from supporting the healthcare systems extensively, providing PPE in a range of environments, but also talking about other important things. Education had to stop. How were we able to support distance and remote learning? How do we use this as an opportunity to start to improve water and sanitation in schools, which is still a challenge? How do we begin to look more broadly at what these impacts are across a range of essential services, the police, the army, border controls? How are we able to support that? So the range of agencies in the UN here in Ghana, and there are 21 who have boots on the ground, and another 16 who have activities in Ghana, even though they don't have offices in Ghana. Everybody rallied around this through a plan which late in 2020, the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, Amina Mohammed, came along and co-launched with the President here. So I think the UN continued to play a deep role. And as the pandemic has receded, the concept of resilience, the concepts around building back better, but I think building forward into a future that means that all those socioeconomic impacts, millions of people who were pushed into poverty because a number of people here rely on daily pay and daily labor to actually make ends meet. When the lockdown came, they were immediately struggling. How do we target social protection better? How do we make LEAP, which is the government social protection program, to be more effective and to target people quickly and where they are using digital technology? These are some of the things that we have been working on with the government of Ghana. But also, how do we ensure that farmers and ordinary citizens are able to go about their business? Ghana did have a great response. Building and strengthening that is really important. The final piece, obviously, was vaccines. And, you know, it was also a global demonstration of partnership that, you know, 5 vaccines were suddenly available. And the COVAX facility and UNICEF particularly and WHO playing a strong role. Ghana was the first country in Africa to receive COVID vaccines through the COVAX facility. And it's a testimony, I think, to a very strong immunization program here in Ghana. Let's recall, in the heat of COVID-19, with the lockdowns on, Ghana was still able to administer over 5 million polio vaccines to young babies, even then. And so Ghana probably had one of the most effective systems that would enable it to be able to roll out the COVID vaccine. We're still struggling with issues of acceptance in certain places, but I think gradually Ghana is on target to at least exceed 50% of its population having access to full 2-shot immunization from COVID-19 by the end of 2022, which is a great feat on this continent.
Well, talking of COVID-19, I know there are conversations at the highest level for Africa to also manufacture COVID-19 vaccines. And we saw the president of Ghana participating in the Commonwealth heads of governments, you know, in Rwanda recently, where they had, I think, a few things laid down for them to begin the manufacturing of COVID-19, which is a great feat for Africa.
I think it is, and I think the president of Ghana said, you know, we can't be caught with our pants down again.
Right.
And this is really important. Are we learning the lessons and how are we building resilience? And I think having the capacity to have a larger and more in-depth pharmaceutical space is really important. The partnership between Senegal, Ghana, Rwanda, and South Africa around vaccines is a really important one. And building that capability over the long haul to be able to ensure that when these kinds of issues arise, this is really important. I mean, I'm going to sidetrack a bit now. Ghana has just finished its voluntary national review.
Right, which we will be coming to that, because I want us to tell us more about that.
And one of the key things coming out of the voluntary national review is the need for new investments in research. The real sense that if we are going to strengthen food systems in Africa, ensure that if these kinds of pandemics strike, we don't see food insecurity in an already insecure environment, that we have the depth and capability and intellectual knowledge and capacity to produce the range of drugs, that we're basically using science and technology better here and relying less on the importation of everything into the country. But we can talk about a bit more about that.
We'll talk about that, yeah, because I want us to learn more about the voluntary national review. How is the UN funded?
The UN is funded from a raft of sources, and we remain grateful to it's largely a multilateral arrangement, which means that every country, including Ghana, pays membership dues, and that forms the core and the basis of funding. And then a raft of countries, depending on national interest, fund particular things to one degree or another. We have a number of multi-partner trust funds that different countries contribute funding to, depending on what the big issues are. We have one that we hope will be launching this year around food systems. Last year was the big food systems summit, and from it, again, learning from COVID, we're beginning to say, how do we build national resilience to COVID? How do we build continental resilience? How do we improve, if you like, supply chains, and particularly in this context, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, the Secretariat is housed here in Ghana. How do we really create a better flow of goods and services across the continent? All of these are things that different nations across the world fund. Ghana also plays a very strong role funding as well, and in many ways. For example, Ghana is probably the 9th or 10th, if I remember, largest contingent in global peacekeeping forces across the world. It has, in fact, the largest number of women who contribute to global peacekeeping. And so Ghana's armed forces are a strong contribution to the United Nations.
We're at the 77th International Day for United Nations Peacekeepers.
Yes,
flag raising ceremony at the Foreign Affairs Ministry on the 29th of May.
Yes. So, I mean, there are a raft of ways in which the UN is funded. Increasingly, we're looking to a UN that is less a funder of programming, but more a leverager. So we want to see a strengthened relationship with the private sector. There is the Global Compact for the private sector that already exists. But how do we localize this? And particularly for countries like Ghana, lower middle income country looking to grow, how are we able to leverage in new resources? What brand equity does the UN bring? What skills and competencies? We largely should be providing, let me quote the special advisor to the president on the SDGs, the highest possible technical assistance to Ghana to be able to put the right policies in place and then galvanize the partnerships necessary to bring the resources to the table.
Bringing the resources to the table. The United Nations recently embarked on some reforms to see it perform better. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, I'm a newbie to the UN. I've only been in the UN 2 years, and there have been a range of reforms. I think a key component of the earlier reforms is something called delivering as one. With 35 different agencies, often operating separately, it's really important to be able to ensure that there is synergy, coherence, and real value addition, that what we do, often I say that the outcome must be more than the sum of the parts. And so improving coordination became really important. And in 2018, I think the UN embarked on a further reform. The key signposts of that were first that there needs to be a more broadened, centered, country-based approach to national and international peace and security. And just last year, we know Ghana proudly joined the UN Security Council for its third stint on that council, and so continues to play a strong role there. And we know that with all the conversations taking place globally, how do we bring more equity and balance to the perspectives that inform the decision-making in the Security Council? And Ghana is one of the countries, unopposed in its membership, rooting for, I think, the perspectives of Africans in the Security Council. The second component was, again, around deepening better coherence and coordination. And for the first time, and this was a key driver for me joining the UN, elevating the role of the resident coordinator, taking it out of any of the agencies, and building a small coordination unit. We don't implement anything. We're there to kind of work with the top level of government, see where the synergies are needed, and help agencies to deliver the best they can in a collaborative way. And of course, the third thing is an efficient UN. The UN is funded from taxpayers' money across the world, not just from one country, but from across the world. And so our accountability, it's important that we're accountable, that we're efficient, and that we're more focused on two big areas. First of all, in country here, my mandate is how are we supporting Ghana to achieve its ambition? Thankfully, Ghana is one of the countries that does have an articulated vision, a desire to become a self-reliant nation, and ultimately is on a journey to a Ghana beyond aid. Right. So focusing our work better around the priorities of government, around the flagship initiatives that the government has set out, this is a key part of this. And building an accountability that is less New York driven as the UN, but actually is more Ghana focused. And so this year we'll be rolling out something called UN Info, which begins to tie all of the work that we do to national priorities identified through Ghana's own medium-term policy development framework, through flagship initiatives like CARES, Obatampa, and other emerging ones around important issues of youth like Youth Start. And so getting to a place where we're more accountable to government, operating in a more coherent and cohesive manner, not operating as 35 different organizations. Yes, each agency brings its unique value, and I've always said that all the value that's here needs to be here, and some. We're working to, for instance, make sure that UN Women re-establish here in Ghana. They left at some point in 2017. But that we bring coherence to that work so that, again, all the pieces are adding up to more than the value of the parts.
Well, before we jump from there and go to the Voluntary National Review, Ghana is gone back to the IMF. And you talked about Ghana Beyond Aid. What's your perspective?
So I think just sitting where I sit, we must acknowledge that Ghana had a growth trajectory of in the 6% going towards 7% pre-COVID. COVID changed all of that globally, first and foremost. It really dislocated economies. It put hundreds of millions of people into poverty. It dislocated lots of businesses. Governments had to borrow significant sums of money in order to fight the pandemic. So clearly the COVID pandemic has put some kind of challenge towards any nation who was aspiring to growth. I think in addition to that, we know that there has been more recently, and particularly in 2022, in 2021 we experienced extreme reductions in oil prices, a key revenue source for Ghana to fund a number of its social initiatives. And then, of course, in this year, we've had the impacts of the Ukraine-Russia crisis. And it was revelatory because I think many Africans, not many even understood the reliance on imports from a place like Ukraine. And suddenly this has become very, very clear as fuel prices rocket, as commodity prices rocket, and everybody's experiencing dire, difficult times. So when you combine the impacts of COVID-19 with all these impacts going on, then of course countries in Africa who don't have huge reserves are in tight fiscal spaces and must explore their options in terms of how they're able to generate the resources if that ambition to a Ghana Beyond Aid continues. We're all aware that recently there were discussions around e-levy as a major source. The 2020 SDG report identifies the gap for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in Ghana by 2030 at a whopping $52 billion a year between now and 2030. That money cannot come unless three things happen. First of all, Ghana needs to obviously get more efficient, just like I described the UN. So how do we get more efficient about the resources that we do use? How do we actually generate more domestic revenue, but generate this fairly in a way that means that poor people aren't taxed too much and the rich get away without paying enough? And economic growth. And I think the decision now to go to the IMF for assistance and for a package is the accumulation of all of these different impacts. And I think will provide the basis for Ghana to begin to have a notion of how it might stabilize and create the fiscal space to move forward. But even globally, we continue to talk about the need to redesign the global financial architecture. What are some of the particular premiums on loans, for instance, to African countries that need to be looked at again in order that the cost of borrowing is not so high and that countries are not spending significant proportions of their GDP on debt servicing. And so there are a raft of things that need to happen, but I think the idea of engaging with the IMF around a program of work to increase the stability of Ghana, create the fiscal discipline required to ensure that this happens, I think this is a welcome step.
Anyways, let's see how that pans out. Now, let's talk about the Voluntary National Review, which you mentioned earlier. I want to understand the concept so we can tie in the, when going forward, we can look at the questions that will follow.
So the Voluntary National Review is something that's being created as a peer mechanism, a review mechanism by member states to actually look at their progress towards achieving the SDGs. In 2015, amid global fanfare, the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them were launched. How do countries hold themselves to account? The Voluntary National Review is one of the key mechanisms that's used for this, as well as the costing exercises. The National Planning Development Commission here in Ghana oversee that process. In July this month, indeed, Ghana will go to the high-level political forum, one of 46 countries globally who will be presenting their Voluntary National Review. High-level political forum. Yes, which is taking place in New York in a couple of weeks, where they will present the outcomes. In 2019, when the first one was done, there was progress. Now, this review will be looking at what are some of the implications of COVID-19, where have we seen slipbacks, where do we want to see progress go. Human rights issues, all of that will be part of it. I mean, the raft of issues there range from financing, and we've just talked about the role of the IMF in that. Where do you find 50 billion? How do you leverage in new kinds of resources to enable you to continue on this journey? But a raft of other issues. We talked briefly about the wicked problem of climate change. How does Ghana adapt effectively? How does Ghana actually build forward in a greener way that means that it's actually not harking back to old ways, and that it's fit for a future in which there will be net zero? And indeed, in 10, 15 years, many countries will not be demanding fuel and petrol from the ground. So how is Ghana's own economy transforming itself? How is Ghana building resilience to the potential impacts of climate change so that it's adapting well? But also, how is Ghana faring using the digital transformation? And indeed, for us, one of the key underlying principles of the Sustainable Development Goals is that no one is left behind. And so looking extensively at who is benefiting from public services, education, health, water and sanitation, who has access to public infrastructure, and looking particularly at those groups, persons with disability, women, children, young people, people who traditionally excluded, and also looking at the sort of urban-rural divide. It's easy to see that often people in urban areas have a lot of access to services, and those in rural areas, sometimes it's an economies of scale matter, but often they are forgotten. So how well is Ghana faring? And I think Ghana conducted a process that involved lots of consultations with different people, and in 2019, Ghana was actually singled out as best practice in terms of the inclusive nature of its consultations. I'm pleased that these issues have continued. Of course, the VNR will show progress, and it does show progress. But these big issues that we've just talked about, they remain important ones. How do we address youth unemployment? How do we address some of the difficult adaptation? How do we ensure that no one actually is left behind? And where is it that critical investments need to be made? We have a dearth of resources. Ghana is in a tight fiscal space. So the VNR should help Ghana to begin to prioritize where those spaces are. And last year, Ghana conducted the 2021 census. So there's a lot of rich data coming out from Ghana Statistical Services that can be used to ensure that we're targeting better, to ensure that those most left behind are reached, and that the investments, again, that Ghana decides to back are the ones that are catalytic, potentially transformative, and again, add up to more than the sum of their parts.
Now, talking of leaving no one behind, let's talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. How have we fared as a country?
So, I mean, the whole VNR is probably the best way to look at that. And I think the outcomes show that there's progress in some key areas. Infrastructure, the 2020 report actually sets out the areas where 50 billion needs to be spent. Infrastructure is high on that. But Ghana has a number of deficits too. In the area of women's inclusion, for example. We have a parliament that still only has 14% of women. Though, interestingly, the census tells us there are more women in Ghana than there actually are men. Women is 50.7% men is 49.3%. Therefore, actually, that representation. So how are we addressing issues of equality and representation? And the other activity that Ghana is currently undertaking, and again, it's a three-part process, government-led, is what's called the Universal Periodic Review. The Universal Periodic Review is an opportunity for Ghana to see in the area of human rights how it is performing in relation to various processes. And again, in January of next year, that report will be presented globally, and again, peer countries will be able to ask questions of Ghana. I think there has been progress. There is now a national mechanism which did not exist at the last time Ghana went to do a review. And so the existence of an NMRF is a progress, and they are working towards this report. There are a number of bills that have been passed, like the Right to Information bill, which has been passed and now increasingly providing access to citizens to be able to have access to information. But there are still deficits. There are a number of particularly protocols, optional protocols around children and their rights in various areas that Ghana is yet to sign. Ghana has not provided its report to the Africa Commission for Human Rights, and really that should be the case. And as we know, there are a range of controversial issues that are still going around. Let me start with the easier ones. Ghana's disability bill doesn't necessarily conform. It doesn't conform with the CPRD, which is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. And over the next 2-3 years, Ghana will be the UN will be supporting Ghanaian institutions and civil society to address that. We're also aware that there's the controversial issue of LGBTQI.
Right, I was going to come to that.
And their rights here in Ghana. Just to be clear, from the UN's point of view, LGBTQ rights are human rights.
They are human rights.
They are human rights as far as we're concerned. Let me quote Nelson Mandela on this. A country is judged not by how it treats the best or the most of its citizens, but how it treats even those it maybe deems are the lowest of its citizens. At the last UPR, certainly Ghana committed to protecting persons with disability from violence and discrimination. And so that commitment already exists. We know there's a big bill in the Parliament. My approach to this conversation is that the UN's role is to provide information to all the parties so that Ghana can make the best decision in line with all the declarations that it has signed globally, including the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. And
that falls under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Yes, absolutely. And let's remember the 4 principles there. The 4 principles are that human rights are universal, they are indivisible, they are inalienable, and they are interconnected. Denial of rights in one sphere leads to denial of rights in another sphere. And that we should be working towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Ghana will make its decision, and
Are we under any obligation to pass the bill, though?
That is a decision that Ghana needs to make. Ghana is a member of the Committee of Nations through the United Nations. The evidence and information is being provided. There is due process here in Ghana. There is a parliamentary committee looking at this matter. And I think there have been public hearings on the issue. Clearly, from the UN's point of view, we believe that this is a human right, but this is not a matter for the UN to legislate on. It's a matter for Ghanaians to decide, largely through the parliament that has been set up here. I remain confident that Ghanaians are perfectly capable of making the decision that is in the best interest of its citizens and aligned to its constitution. And our role is to continue to provide information to all parties as they march forward to making that decision.
All right, so we are waiting to see the outcome of the bill that is currently before Parliament. Now, away from this, let's talk about the mandates of the United Nations. Recently, the UN has come under heavy criticisms, especially with regards to the Russia-Ukraine war, which is currently ongoing. Has the UN lost it? Or, like you said, they are extremely powerful. Is it still extremely powerful to ensure that rules are abided by?
So, of course, the UN is the custodian of the collective will of countries. It's not a superpower sitting on its own making independent decisions. the Security Council, and it's a real shame that we have a Security Council which is supposed to be protecting the world, in which some parties are at war. So perhaps the bigger question is, have we failed ourselves globally around the commitments to peace? Have we failed ourselves as countries globally around issues of peace and security? There's a recent report that shows that in the last 10 years we're at the highest point of conflicts across the world. Yeah. This reflects an increasing, if you like, nationalistic approach within governments across different spectra and different regions globally. And so how do we need to come back to this conversation properly? And I think this is where it is really important not to single out who to blame, but for all of us as nations and as actors to begin to reflect more carefully on what we can do and have a different kind of generative conversation about what is the way forward that encapsulates the diversity of perspective, that creates the tolerance that we need. We have conflicts that are driven by perspectives around religion, around ethnicity, around security differences. How do we create a really trusted space in which this kind of dialogue can happen very holistically and very honestly, and that the best interests of everybody are taken into account? This crisis came up, the Ukraine crisis came up quite rapidly, and we are seeing really serious impacts from it. I think the UN was forthright in condemning violence, condemning war, condemning all the issues that have created refugees across the board. But we must expand that concept to all the conflicts that are happening globally and ensure that we're acting to ensure the Sahel, just at the top of Ghana, is in an extreme conflict. We have issues in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Guinea, and in fact, as we sit here today, ECOWAS under the presidency of Ghana is meeting again to discuss these issues, to see how we can find a solution to create stability in this region. It is this kind of generative conversation that the UN provides a platform for, but member states must come to. And I think Ghana is playing its role as a member of the Security Council and has made its position clear. I think it's time for a new generative conversation, not for breaking the UN, but for elevating the level of conversation that is provided through the UN and the various multilateral agencies, the EU, as well as nation states, to look for solutions to this problem globally.
Well, some have expressed their views by saying that the temporary term on the Security Council is not enough, inadequate. What's your thoughts about that?
So clearly, I'm an employee of the United Nations. I think the principles that are espoused around equity and the involvement and inclusion and leaving no nation behind suggest that there is reform required in this space. And as I said, one of the Secretary General's 3 agendas for reform in 2018 is to reform the Security Council to make it more effective. I know that Ghana stands on the side of equity and stands on the side of ensuring that voices, certainly from this continent, are heard better in the United Nations, not just in the Security Council, but in the Social and Economic Council as well, where a number of the decisions around, for example, finance flows, are also placed. So we look to Ghana and its leadership in some of those conversations to help to push that process. But again, the decisions that take place at the United Nations are actually the decisions of all the countries that make up the United Nations. The ECOSOC Council is actually the deciding body. And so when people say the UN has failed, they're actually saying we have failed. And so it's about how we all recognize that, and I think work in a more collegiate manner, deepening our listening and dialogue skills to a level where we can generate new results and new thinking that enables the inclusivity that will allow the world to be a peaceful place to really elevate to the next level.
Well, I've seen recently, I've been following the activities of the United Nations here in Ghana, and I've seen that sanitation is one of your areas. You are very much interested in keeping our environments clean. Again, I know you will refer this to climate change. I saw a few collaborations between your outfit, your organization, which is the UN, and other private, the private sector organizations. Why is it so important?
So, I mean, do we need to say more in the context of global pandemics? Water and sanitation, having access to clean water and sanitation, I think is a fundamental right for every citizen. Not only that, I mean, it has health implications, it has dignity implications for girls who go to school, and open defecation is still a massive problem here. A number of agencies, UNICEF is one of the leaders in this space, has been working extensively with the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and a number of development partners, particularly the government of Canada, the government of Germany, to really figure out ways to do this. And the government itself is quite keen on this, but really we have to get to a place where open defecation is near zero, if not zero. We have to find ways that mean that not only government is paying for sanitation services, but that individuals are able to afford this. And one of the innovative programs that we're discussing is how to leverage cheap finance into the marketplace, build young entrepreneurs, and at the same time offer sanitation facilities through low-interest loans to families and households so that more of these can be built. I visited Gamashe when I first arrived here in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And one of the key issues communities faced in the lockdown was water and sanitation issues. So really finding solutions to this, particularly in urban areas where there are dense populations, is a really important issue. But, you know, and we've seen recently with the floods here in Ghana, in Accra particularly, this is really a problem if we're really going to contain and address disease in a resilient manner. So I think water and sanitation is extremely important.
Well, talking of diseases, I said chickenpox. What I meant was monkeypox. So has the conversation reached the multilateral level already? Because I was watching the news yesterday and I realized that in the European countries, some European countries have started recording monkeypox, you know, in their countries.
Yeah. So I mean, definitely there are lessons that we learned from Ebola and the kinds of, if you like, maybe some of the gaps and omissions that allowed Ebola to become a big issue on the West African coast before. I think WHO has learned those lessons. And certainly the Ministry of Health and Ghana Health Services are very much at the forefront. So without being able to give you details of what WHO is doing, certainly we have, the surveillance is ongoing, and I have every confidence that the partnership between the Ghana Health Services, Ministry of Health, and WHO are keeping their eye on this, as indeed we continue to keep our eyes on the COVID-19 pandemic. In the last few weeks, there was another spike in COVID infections, particularly in Greater Accra, making sure that we continue to pass messages around how people are observing protocols, really pushing that more and more people take the vaccine, because even though those who take the vaccine can still be infected, we know that the, if you like, the impacts of the disease or the way in which the disease presents itself among those who are vaccinated is much, much milder. And all of that will reduce the impacts on the health system, which then mean that issues like monkeypox, that the government can focus in on these as well. Well,
we have done 53 minutes already.
Wow.
See, I told you 1 hour is never enough. How long have you been in Ghana, Your Excellency?
I've been here 2 years. I arrived here in late May of 2020, right in the middle of COVID. And went into 1 month of quarantine. And so I always count the first year as lost. So I've been here 2 years, but I still claim I'm only here 1 year, and I'm still in my honeymoon period, Ghana.
You are indeed in your honeymoon period in Ghana. Well, you are an African, if I can put it that way. You know, the debates regarding Ghana jollof and Nigerian jollof
I knew you would come here.
Someone just sent me a message that ask Your Excellency which one is the best. Ask him not to be biased. Your Excellency, now this question is for you. I have no hand in this one. It was just thrown at me. I didn't see it coming. Yes. So please.
What's the question?
Ghana jollof and Nigerian jollof. Which one is the best? Have you tasted Ghana jollof?
Of course I have. Of course I have. I eat it quite regularly. So the first point I will make is that Ghana and Nigeria, yes, I'm a Nigerian-British citizen, we are siblings. We are one family. And so it is expected that among family members there will often be small arguments here and there. So I think Ghana jollof rice is amazing. Nigerian jollof rice is amazing.
Oh, that's the diplomat talking. So you see, that is the diplomat talking.
And the important thing about this is that we have enough jollof rice for everybody to eat, and that there's no food insecurity as a result of the bickering between Ghana and Nigeria over jollof rice. Well, we have more important global problems to solve than jollof rice.
Well, I have a few messages coming in from our social media platforms. This one says, John says, I want to know what the UN is doing about Russia-Ukraine war. I don't see much happening. Lives and properties are being destroyed. I believe you touched on this extensively.
I can touch on it in a couple of ways. Obviously, live there within the tragedy that's happening in Ukraine, I think the UN has played a very strong role through OCHA to really help to remove particularly civilians from the war fronts. And if you follow the news, you will see this. And to continue to be a global advocate against conflict and violence. And also a lot of the conversations that sort of border on issues around the Geneva Convention and making sure that there are, basically there's no crimes being committed. And I think all of that is being well documented. But here in Ghana, we know that the impacts are real. WFP and FAO in 2020, again in the middle of COVID, conducted the first, with the Ministry of Agriculture, conducted the first food security survey for the last 10 years in Ghana, and are building on this now with analysis around what are the impacts in terms of the impacts on food shortages, prices of fertilizers, and I chair also the Heads of Cooperation Group, which is all the heads of cooperation of many of the development partners working here. And I can assure you that this is a pertinent issue for us here in country, and a number of analyses are taking place in the EU, across different agencies within the UN system, with a view to rolling out programs. The Africa Development Bank have just rolled out a program around fertilizer subsidies to ensure that this year's harvest continues. Otherwise, with shortages and import shortages, then we would really have a problem here. And we're looking at what are some of the longer-term solutions to some of these problems. If we're dependent on fertilizer from Ukraine, looking at how is Ghana developing independent capability. But when we think about climate change too, how are we going back to mass production of organic fertilizers, which are good for the soil and which will guarantee climate adaptation and longevity to the agricultural output from Ghana. Okay,
John Nati, there you have it. Now, this is a very sensitive, concern raised by one of our viewers on social media as well. Aliu Musa says, Sir, you are a propagandist for the UN. The UN is a puppet of the USA. What has the UN done about all the resolutions against Israel? Personally, if I were Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, Pakistan, India, and maybe Nigeria, a new non-aligned body should be formed to look after their interest. Interesting.
Well, definitely interesting. Let me say a couple of things on this. I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all definition of the UN, and increasingly, in Africa, for example, the UN is proudly headed by Africans, many Africans. That's not to say that the aim is to have only Africans in Africa. The UN is a true multilateral organization and must be truly multicultural. Right. But I think that those who have steeped experience in the solutions and the perspectives from Africa are increasingly represented, not just in Africa, but across the world within the United Nations system. So to describe the UN as a puppet, I think it is far more complicated than that. And these issues, as I've described, are quite complex, and solving them is quite complex. On conflicts across the globe, there are many, many conflicts across the globe. To expect that with the snap of a hand, the UN will be able to change this, I think the UN is playing its role, which is to enable people come to the table to dialogue. And again, I refer back to, levels of dialogue cannot be oppositional.
Right.
Levels of dialogue need to generate inclusive solutions, and we need to co-create those solutions. And so when we lob stones at each other, we're unlikely to do this. So how do we have a better dialogue, which then says, here are the solutions to this crisis, rather than just being a critic? As I often say, what the UN needs to hear is more solutions. So to your if you like, your viewer, I would say, what do you think we should do?
Right.
Let's work together to find those solutions.
All right, so Kenneth Smith says, hi, very insightful discussion. Okay, now it's 5 o'clock exactly, and I want you to share your last words with us.
So, first of all, to all of Ghana, let me just say I've appreciated being here. Ghana is a friendly nation. The other day, someone was saying we're the land of 1,000 hills, and someone in response said, Ghana is the land of 1,000 welcomes. And I really have appreciated the welcome that I've had here in Ghana, right from citizen number one, Mr. President, all the way through to the everyday people that I work and deal with here in Ghana. Transforming the UN and making the UN more fit for business for Ghana is the prime objective that I have here. There can't be a one-size-fits-all. Ghana is not South Sudan. Ghana is Ghana. Ghana is on a trajectory for growth. Ghana has a big ambition, and so we have to step up to match that ambition and be able to serve Ghana much more better and much more accountably, and that's something that we hope to achieve. Later this year, we will be launching a new cooperation framework with the government of Ghana, and at the center of that is putting Ghanaians first, the government, citizens, the private sector, to see how we can ensure that actually we are contributing to that dream of self-reliance, and that we're contributing to Ghana being able to stand on its own 2 feet and be able to run forward. So this means a UN that still has a lot of influence, but is sitting more at the background. I call it leadership from behind. And so pushing leadership from behind is critical. It's systems leadership that strengthens Ghana's systems to deliver, strengthens Ghana's systems to account, strengthens Ghana's system to include people, particularly young people who are the future. And as I always say, the future is not in the future is right here and now. How all these people are included, how they have the skills and the capabilities to take their own place in Ghana's prosperous dream. And be part of a better Ghana. And overall, every country faces problems. And yes, Ghana has its own fair share of challenges, and it has its fair share of things it must do as well. But if I were to overall rate it, I would say it's a cup half full and filling, not a cup half empty.
All right. Thank you very much, Your Excellency Charles Abani, the UN Residence Coordinator to Ghana, for joining us on today's episode of Diplomatic Affairs. We are very, very grateful to you.
Thank you very much for having me here today. And hopefully, maybe we can have some more sessions where we focus and drill down on some very specific issues. This is such a broad spectrum of issues to cover, and there's so much going on. So it would be great to come again, and thank you for having me.
Anytime. You have a loyalty card as well.
Thank you very much.
Right, so this has been another edition of Diplomatic Affairs. It's been very insightful and informative as promised. So it's all about learning the modus operandi of the United Nations. I have even appreciated the UN better through this interaction, and I believe you also did. And so thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you same time next week. My name is Harriet Nati. Have a good weekend.